Born in Cleveland, raised a hillbilly. What's your story? Welcome to the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast. Here's your host, Sarah Blossom Ware.
Welcome back to the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Blossom Ware. Today I'll be reading the chapter, Banging on the Barrel. Granny had a black rotary phone that was mounted on her wall near the front door, but Olin did not have phone service. Granny and Olin communicated by banging on 55-gallon steel drums. Granny would go out with her hammer to bang on the barrel. Bang, bang, bang. Olin would walk out his front door and yell, "Whoop, Mom!" Then they would yell back and forth whatever needed to be communicated. Granny's phone almost never rang, unless there was a lightning strike nearby. This would cause the bell on the phone to make a very sluggish, half-hearted attempt at a ring. One afternoon, there was a lightning strike so close and powerful that it blew that black phone off the wall and sent it sailing across the room. The speaking that I heard up until this time had been done by my parents, who came from Cleveland. The speaking that I heard at Granny's house was sometimes foreign and confusing to me. Dinner was lunch, and supper was dinner. It's pert near time for dinner meant it was almost time for lunch, pretty near time. Pert near was not to be confused with roast near, which was a piece of corn on the cob, a roasting ear. Granny and I went round and round one afternoon trying to communicate with one another. She kept saying to me, "Go get me a pin." I was wandering around all over the living room, searching for a safety pin, or a straight pin, or a push pin, or a clothes pin. The whole time, Granny kept saying, "A pin! A pin! Don't you know what a pin is?" Yes, I did, but I wasn't finding one. Finally, she got up reluctantly from her rocking chair and went to the kitchen and brought back a pen. Despite Granny's best efforts to educate me in the hillbilly language, I was still lagging behind. In kindergarten one day, Mrs. Clark instructed us to use crayons to color a picture on some construction paper. She then told us to wad up our paper as part of the project. In my mind, I was running the word wad over and over, trying to make a connection. I thought I had figured it out and walked over to the sink in the classroom and ran water over my picture. Wad, water, water. I was very embarrassed when I saw the other kids crumpling their papers instead of wetting them. Needless to say, I ruined my art project. I always felt like an outsider looking in, but make no mistake about it, I was definitely in the thick of it, a real Arkansas hillbilly. Okay, now it's time to meet our new panel members for today's podcast and a few of the subsequent podcasts that we're going to have. So I would like for panel members to please go ahead and state your name and give your 6-word summary. And then for this podcast, also after your 6-word summary, give a little bit of other background, and we'll go from there. Azka?
Hi. My 6-word summary would be living between two cultures in one society. So basically, I'm a student at Benedictine University. I'm a senior. My current walk of life would be being a crazy pre-med student in the sciences and trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. My childhood background would be, as I said, living between two cultures. I grew up in America with a Pakistani home, so that was always intense.
Okay, thank you.
My name is George Kuharick. I am Sarah Ware's brother. 6-word summary, I would say most at home in the woods. So my childhood background is, Sarah wrote this book and I lived it along with her. So we'll, I'm sure, get into more of that. Currently live back in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Moved away a few times, keep making my way back there. I live with my 11-year-old daughter Ella, and really like the area there. We enjoy life there, so we're big into the outdoors, camping, canoeing, kayaking, so that's a perfect area for us.
Okay, yep. So this should be fun. We can have some same memories or maybe some contested memories. We'll see how that'll work.
For sure.
So before we get into discussions, there's a segment that I call, So What Have You Been Busy With Lately? So, George, what have you been busy with lately?
What have I been busy with lately? Well, my daughter Ella keeps me very busy. So she is getting ready to start 6th grade, getting ready to start another soccer season as well. She's big into soccer. Busy with work. I work for Goodyear Tire. I'm actually in Chicago right now on a work trip. So get to travel quite a bit with work, and then travel as much as I can for fun. My girlfriend Angela and I, we every chance we get, we try to see a new place. Whether it's here in this country or anywhere we can find the time and the money to go visit. That occupies most of our free time.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. All right. So this chapter I call the communication chapter, the banging on the barrel chapter. So we have some discussion questions based around kind of communication in different cultures or, in different generations maybe. So the first question is involving basically new ways to communicate. What do you think? So Facebook, cell phones, pros and cons, of all of this technology that we have now. I mean, I remember, we didn't have cell phones when I was growing up, and now I'm thinking, how on earth did my parents ever know where we were or like what we were doing? They sometimes didn't, obviously, but somehow they always picked us up eventually, but it's so easy now to have all this access to just call somebody, text, Facebook, whatever. But so maybe what are some drawbacks to this, and then what are some of the things that you really like about it? Azka?
Well, you grew up then. I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s. So it was like the transition period between everyone getting cell phones. So I know what you mean. Like, how did your parents know? Because we would just go out without cell phones and we would be back by dinner time, basically. That was the time you had to be back, and we would bike around, run around like crazy, and you just knew you had to be back. And if you didn't be back, that never happened, actually. Like, our parents were never worried, so they were just like, come home by dinner time. That was like the standard. And in this age of technology, I feel like it's bittersweet because it's really, really good, yet it's really, really bad because you get to communicate with everyone around the world, but at times it's like you're communicating so much. Before, we used to live without technology. Now it's like it's integrated in every part of our lives. So we're talking so much with everyone that it sometimes becomes crazy. Like, you're texting so much, you're calling so much that it's just like overwhelming at times.
Yeah.
And there is such a thing, I think, as being too accessible. Even when I first started college, I resisted the cell phone for as long as I could, and people would have to drop in and see me actually at my apartment. Nowadays, that just never happens. No one just drops in unannounced. Also think it has kind of ruined the art of the good argument. Everyone has a smartphone now, and we used to sit around and argue about the silliest little things for hours, and now it's like you get 5 minutes into an argument and someone looks it up, figures out what. Okay, well, yeah, it proves you wrong within a couple minutes. So, good and bad, yeah.
Yeah. During the semester, I got off of Facebook for like 6 months, and it was the funniest thing ever because I realized people depend on Facebook so much, especially students, like asking questions, finding out events and stuff. But I told people, I was like, you have my number or you have my email. Do it. Like, email me or just text me. And people actually would call. Like, I have a friend, he doesn't text, he only calls. So I would get calls from him often, or emails, or I would see him around campus. So I thought it was really interesting, like, getting off of Facebook. Like, it's manageable, but a lot of people think it's burdensome to get off of Facebook because everyone's coordinating. Your life is around Facebook now, like events, where to go, what to do, especially with the college life.
That's where I get my news.
Yeah. No, don't get your news from Facebook. My mom gets her news from Facebook.
That can be dangerous.
No.
Yeah, that's true. But it's also true that's where I get most of my news. Then I can look it up and be like vetted or whatever. But
all those crazy science discoveries or arguments that are going over Facebook, those are always funny. My mom always reposts stuff, and I'm like, Mom, this isn't true.
Do 2 minutes of research before you repost that. Yeah.
There's always these, like, if you repost this, we'll donate $1. And I'm just like, this is not true at all in any extent. It's funny.
Okay. So I had a really hard time understanding Granny. With the pin thing, I was really trying. I was really, really searching for a pin, and I couldn't find anything like that. And anyway, so then it was a pen, and if I'd have known that, I could have found that. But, and I remember also when I was visiting in England, we did not understand the Cockney accent at all. And it was like, we're trying to order pizza and we're like, I know they're trying to say something and it's probably in English, but we seriously had no idea what they're saying. So I just thought maybe, we'll just throw that out there. Have you been in a situation where you actually had a really hard time understanding somebody's, when they were speaking the same language actually as you, or maybe a dialect or something like that?
Yeah, I never was sure where I fit into the accent spectrum, I guess, growing up. We would go up north to visit family, and everyone would say what a southern accent I had, and then I would be back in Arkansas, and everyone would say how I sounded like a Yankee. So I had the same experience with the pin versus pen. Melanie Key at the time used to always make fun of me for the way I would pronounce things like that. But now, with working for an international company, I'm constantly dealing with people that have super strong accents or different dialects, people from India, China, South America, and I've learned that nonverbal communication, as long as you have a basic grasp of the English language, it's all about the nonverbal communication.
Yeah. Okay.
For me, English was my second language. I grew up speaking Urdu in my household, so this is me every day. So me and my brothers, we all speak Urdu fluently, but we can't write it. So it's our main communication with our parents. They speak English, but they prefer speaking Urdu. So there are times where we don't understand some words. And my mom will send me to the grocery store. She's like, oh, get haldi or something. And I'm like, Mom, what is it? I totally forget these things. And she's like, no, it's haldi. And I'm like, Mom, really? And the words sound alike that it just bites you in the butt. So it's just oh geez. And whenever we talk to our family in Pakistan, it's we can speak to them, but sometimes the humor is different. So they'll be cracking jokes left and right, and I wouldn't get it, and it takes me a while to get it because they use different words and different accents. So the northern people have a different accent than the southern people. And I'm like, what was the joke? I don't get it. Everyone's laughing. And they're like, oh, you won't get it. You're American. And I'm just like, really? Really? But the funny thing is, every time we visit, people are awed because we still can speak the mother tongue fluently without an accent. So, and the other thing I wanted to talk about was that because we live in Chicago, the Midwest is the place that seems in the United States not to have the most obvious accent compared to East-West. So it was really funny to see you guys talking about your accents, because I know Chicagoans apparently stress some vowels that they know you're from Chicago. Mm-hmm. But I go to Kansas often, and they have just different words and different dialects, but they everyone in the Midwest seems to have a common way of speaking. So dialects is just really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. When you were saying that, I was thinking of the Netherlands too. When we would go to church, it was in Dutch, and we would get the simultaneous translation through headsets, and we never got the jokes. They just, sometimes they didn't even try, and everyone's laughing, and we're just sitting there. And sometimes they tried and really failed, and like, what? We're so confused. But yeah, the jokes really are hard to translate.
I can relate to that, though. In high school, I went to the NATO conference in Chicago where the Dalai Lama was speaking, and we get to listen to the headsets, and it had like 5 different languages. But like the thing was, like, he was either speaking English or his mother tongue, but everyone was just quiet. They were like, oh crap, it's the Dalai Lama, we got to be quiet, it's important. And I'm just like, I don't know what he's saying. Why is everyone so in tune to this? I couldn't hear him because we were in the back and he was all the way in the front. And Sean Penn got some awards, so that was interesting.
He got some awards?
Yeah.
With the Dalai Lama?
Yeah.
The Dalai Lama presented Sean Penn an award?
Yeah.
Hey, the Dalai Lama came to Fayetteville not long ago, believe it or not. He's like the coolest guy I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, he's really relaxed.
Flowing robes, had this little visor on. Yeah, he was awesome.
That's awesome.
Okay, so moving on. I have the story about when I was in Mrs. Clark's class, and she wanted us to wad up our papers, and I didn't ask the question, and I ended up completely ruining my whole art project because I refused to ask. I was so embarrassed. I did not know what wad meant. So I'm just wondering, was there a time that maybe you didn't understand something fully, but you refused to ask a question, and then like how did that turn out for you?
For me, I'm a student, so I can relate to this. Usually I'm the type to ask questions when no one wants to ask the question, like during lectures or lab. But the thing was, I was taking an MCAT course, and I didn't take biochemistry yet, and the professor teaching the biology part was like blurring through biochem within minutes. So for me, like to even ask like a one question, like I wanted to ask so many questions, but like she wouldn't let you ask the question. So I asked her a question and she's like, don't worry about it. Every time, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about biochem.
Don't worry about biochem. It's the biggest part on the MCAT. Don't worry about it. It's not in your book, and it ends up being in your book. So it was just like both ways. Like if you ask more questions, it opens up even more questions, you know? It's more than just like understanding like the fact. It's like understanding the concepts that comes in, makes you feel like, oh, I don't know enough.
Well, yeah, you ask quite a lot of questions in class.
I do. It's funny, not many do.
Nobody will, yeah.
I know. I was so confused in biolab and genetics lab because with the flies, we were doing the flies. And it was like making even like the mixture. I was like, how much water would you even add? And everyone's adding like various amounts. And I'm like tapping mine and I'm like, I think I need more water because I wanted the perfect amount. And we ended up having really good flies, like the reproduction and everything. So I was like, it worked out. And my plants were my favorite part.
Yeah, ask questions.
That's the exception. I think as a general rule, people would rather be confused than embarrassed.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's not embarrassing. It's your education. Ask the questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Me too.
Not everyone does. Okay, so the next thing let's talk about is I'd be really interested to hear your memories, your take on like the first time you remember, or like a really memorable time you remember being in a different culture, either in a different country or just a different culture within, the U.S. or whatever. But I'm just really interested in like the feelings and like the description of, wow, this is really different, or what were you thinking, and describe that.
I'm sure Azka has several stories related to this, but I mean, just a recent one for me. Went to Puerto Rico last year, which I think is a great place to visit if someone wants to dabble in a Latin American culture, because almost everyone there speaks both English and Spanish, so you could really get by even without speaking a lot of Spanish. And it was amazing after just a couple days how quickly I could kind of get by on Spanish. But it's we spent a couple days in San Juan, which is almost 2 million people in the whole San Juan area, huge city. But then once you get outside of town, it's I felt much more at home, maybe because I was more in the country and those were more my people. But I don't know, I thought it was a great place to visit, and I plan on going back hopefully next year. It's a nice starter to immersing yourself in another culture. Now they're not doing so good on their economy right now, so hopefully hopefully it's still a viable place to visit here soon. But
Yeah. For me, oh gosh, going to I've been to a few countries, and I would say I've also been to England and Canada, but I'll start with Pakistan. So the most memorable time is actually when we were in Pakistan. We went to the airport. It's like a 12-hour flight there at first, so you're really tired. And next thing I know, I was 11 years old. I leave the airport door and you're hit with a wave of humidity, just this wave of heat and humidity that you're in Pakistan, and you see you hear all the crazy rickshaws and all that, and all I heard was my name being called. I'm 11 years old and I'm waiting for my mom outside, and I hear Azka, Azka, and I'm like, who are these people? I don't know these people. So I just turn around and walk back inside, and next thing I know, these were my aunts and uncles and my cousins, and we go. And the funny thing is, in Pakistan, there isn't your typical sections of government. So there's not really an FDA, there is, but it's not a regulated government. So the thing is, there's a lot of different ways things are done. So there's not that many roads, there's main roads and stuff. So my family lives in Lahore and Karachi, which are main cities, but people still live in rural areas and are nomadic lifestyle still. So we were in Karachi and we went home, and it was just funny because electricity would keep going in and out, in and out. It's not regulated. So when people here in the summer, in America, in some summers when it rains so much or there's tornado season, electricity goes out for a day or a couple hours. People are freaking out, oh no, there's no light or electricity. I'm so bored. I need to do something. And it was just crazy because when we were there for the whole summer, we were used to being without electricity at some times, and it was enjoyable. It was super hot, and it was crazy. The biggest thing was their milk is delivered every day. So milk is delivered every day by a guy on a bicycle. And is it pasteurized? No. And it was super funny because they're don't drink the water if it's not filtered. Don't drink the milk. And one of the biggest things me and my brothers missed was milk. The milk was super watery and it was so gross. And when we came back, we literally chugged a gallon of milk. We were so thirsty for milk. You miss dairy. They're not big on dairy there. Cheeses and yogurts and stuff, they're not big on that because it's a very it's kind of a desert climate almost. So there's not many dairy farming and all that milk there, but just the way the lifestyle, it was very family oriented. You didn't sit inside on your computer all day. No. You were out and about in the city typically. Yeah, and one of the biggest things they do is when it rains a lot, people go play in the rain. You're 11 years old and you're on the roof. They have huge roofs on the top, and they're concrete houses, so they don't have like insulated walls and stuff because it's so hot. And so people would go on the roof and like dance and play in the rain, and like the roads were like muddy and stuff, and it was just funny. Like it was such a great
We can relate
experience.
to a lot of that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I bet. But,
playing in the mud puddles.
yeah.
No electricity, too hot to stay inside. Yeah.
But it was fun that you're outside. Like, it's what you remember. And a lot of people my age, like, miss that.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah,
and a lot of them tend to go back to Pakistan and enjoy that family lifestyle. Like, being together, being outside versus, like, being inside all day. So, yeah.
Right. And that's all you have to do as family or outside. It's like you get to know your family and you like the outdoors.
Yeah.
You know?
Somewhat.
Okay. Yeah. I always like to give kind of a last words. Like if you guys have any kind of last words before we wrap up this podcast, the floor is open. Anything you really wanted to say, didn't get out?
Well, this is my first time joining one of your podcasts, and I'll just say that I was totally prepared to rip apart your recollections of our childhood memories when I read your book at first. But I agree that with at least 90% of your memories match up with mine, so I'll give you credit for that.
Cool. So it was really that strange. This is corroborated.
Yep.
What I would say is I met Dr. Ware my freshman year in biolab, and I didn't expect her to be that way. She's like, oh, hey, I grew up in the hillbilly area. I'm a hillbilly. And I'm like, what? She has a PhD. She researched in Germany. How is this possible? And everyone's just like odd. And I thought that was like the funniest thing ever. Like, you're teaching like in a university and you grew up without like electricity and stuff. And so when I read the book, I read it in one sitting. And I thought it was like the funniest thing ever. And like I wrote about it for a school newspaper as well. And I had a chance to finally read it. And I was so awed and I was so interested like in the recollection and like the way you grow up, because there's also another book called The Glass Castle that I had to read in high school, which was similar to that, but it was a little bit like it's more depressed. But this one was like lighthearted, and it was really fun to see how people grew up that way, and how like even in like modern times, like in today's society, people still live like that, you know? And it's just really funny to see and how everything happened. I think it's great.
Yeah, people still live like that in Kuharick.
Oh, yeah.
Like, totally today live like that. But, well, I just like, you know, getting all your stories, too, out of it. So that's my favorite part. You know, if I tell some stories and then I hear some stories. So that's the kind of the point of the whole podcast is to share stories and, you know, relate. There's some common denominators, even from hillbillies to Pakistanis or, you know.
Yeah, that's what I really liked. I could relate to it so much. Like with all these questions and stuff, all I thought about was like how my family and being in Pakistan, like without electricity, without cell phones and stuff, was like the craziest thing ever, because all you have is really each other to keep yourself entertained.
True. Okay, so let's wrap up this one. But thank you very much for listening to the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus Podcast. Tune in next time when we hear about which child got left behind. Until then, dream big and have fun.